1935. Your company has invested $600 million in the country, employs over 11,000 people. How do you see this debt issue as changing the dynamic, the business dynamic, if you would, with China?
I don't know that it's changing the business dynamic in terms of am I going to choose where to invest based on who owns what debt. I mean, I will invest based upon where the growth is, and China has continued to grow. China has continued to make the economic decisions they need to keep growing. So we'll keep doing that.
So it's still a worthwhile investment. Do you worry it changes the political dynamic?
Yeah, you do have to be concerned about that at some point. How is that going to work out? And I've somebody once said, I wish I could take credit for it, but they said, if we ever have to defend Taiwan, we're going to have to borrow the money from China to do it. And you kind of puts it into perspective when you sit there as the nation's military, and when you have a guy like Mike Mullen saying the biggest national security threat we have right now is our debt. It kind of reinforces Condi Rice's comments about, look, you got to have your finances in order before you can do anything, because it's not like a military gives you a great financial economy. You are able to afford one if you have a great economy, and we're starting to get that backwards.
You mentioned Condoleezza Rice, former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice. Let's play some sound for our viewers of her at the Republican National Convention.
When the world looks at us today, they see an American government that cannot live within its means. They see an American government that continues to borrow money that will mortgage the future of generations to come. The world knows that when a nation loses control of its finances, it eventually loses control of its destiny. That is not the America that has inspired people to follow our lead.
Is debt eroding our ability to lead?
I think absolutely. I think when you look at the U.S. and Europe, the two largest developed economies in the world, both struggling to make decisions on how to solve the debt problems, the world loses confidence, and it impacts the entire global economy, as we've seen the last couple of years. A good example was August of 2011, when the world looked at Congress, who was paralyzed, couldn't make a decision. It shook up the economy immediately. A bigger day is coming.
It shook up the economy, but yet the yields on our debt went even lower. So, it's complex in that people still, at least at this point in time, seem to see the U.S. as the safe haven. But as you were just saying earlier, Larry, you think that that's beginning to change?
Well, it is certainly changing at the moment. But let me just describe what happened when we were downgraded. A portfolio is a basket of risk. And the benchmark of a portfolio is still U.S. Treasuries, and despite the downgrade. And so if you think about it, you have this basket, and in this basket is risk. And Treasuries represent the largest component of the basket, and now it feels more of the basket of risk, and things are tumbling over the other side. So what portfolio managers did, they had to sell other securities, not the benchmark. And so there was a great amount of speculation that we were going to see a rise in rates because of the reduction in our credit rating. We actually saw more purchases of treasuries because of that. But getting to your direct question related to confidence, unquestionably, America is still considered the key leader in the world, economically, politically. But that is being eroded. But I don't want anyone to think that we are not still considered the leader. As you suggested at the beginning of this program, China owns our largest amount of debt, and they own the largest component of our debt because they still consider us to being the economic leader. So I think it'd be inappropriate to say this is all doom and gloom, but I think what is appropriate.
Well, we have a responsibility.
We have a responsibility for our children, for our grandchildren. We have a responsibility of fixing this, but we have a responsibility to our lenders, to China, to our pension funds who own this. So we have a responsibility, and we have to address it now.
Given what you see right now with the U.S. debt, if any of you were CEO of S&P, if you were running S&P, where would you rate the U.S. debt right now?
Thank God I'm not at S&P. say, these low rates, okay, are kind of interesting right now. It creates this interesting dynamic. But with a lot of this stuff, things are true until they're not. So it's like you're not going to see the interest rates go up 1 basis point a week for 50 weeks and then go, here's where the problem occurs. This stuff turns overnight. And when it does, then you find yourself saying, oh, my God, because there's a herd instinct to this. As Larry and everybody else has been pointing out, there's a kind of a confidence or a psychological impact to this. So all these studies you ever see that starts off with first assume the investor is rational, they are not. So when the herd turns against you, it gets ugly fast, and all of a sudden you're scrambling. You haven't put the thought into it, and that's what we're trying to say needs to be done now, is they need to put the thought in. They need to resolve this thoughtfully, proactively, so we never run into that point where the herd turns and we're in trouble.
The thing that concerns me about the debt is that China and Japan's our second largest debt holder, they're doing this for their own self-interest. And it could be in their own self-interest to not hold our debt any longer. We're not in control of that. So it could be a completely rational action for them to say this is not where we want to be. And it might not be on our actions. It might be because they have their own internal requirements. And we're subject to that fallout. To get to your direct question, certainly I think I've said it before, we have a 1.6% interest rate on 10-year treasuries. There's nothing the U.S. government has done in the noble past to deserve that low of a rate, in my mind.
To the original question, if you're the CEO of S&P, you're handicapping Congress's ability to compromise.
Mm-hmm.
They stop digging in their heels, reach out, and compromise. If they compromise, as Larry said, I think we've got a very bright future.
Yeah,
But given where we are now, Scott, as Bob points out, we've been handed a gift with these low rates on treasuries. Should people, let me rephrase this. We'll get back to my original question if you're willing to answer it here. Where would you rate U.S. debt right now?
It's back to you're betting on Congress's ability to compromise.
I think we just still have our fourth credit card, too.
I'll say lower than it is currently.
Lower than it is currently.
The biggest risk we have is the demographics of Japan and China. So both nations are rapidly becoming older. Even China. People forget about the one-child policy, 3 generations of this. So the burden that the Chinese are going to have related to the age is going to be significant. Ultimately, China, with its $3 trillion reserves, is going to have to start putting that to work. Maybe they're going to have some social programs. Japan, within 10 years, is going to transfer itself from a saving society to a spending society as more and more of the population ages. So we have a short window, probably 10 years or less, to fix this, and fix this substantially. We should not be...
About the debt problem.
The debt problem. We cannot be that dependent on China.
You're not saying we wait 10 years to
No, we have to take the next step now.
We have to see that occurs over the next 10
On that note,
But it's going to be mitigated. Each year it may get worse.
with at least a 10-year fix, but there has to be a fix where you can...
No question. But
if we don't do it now, certainty that this is what's going to happen.
There's got to, it lends very well to what we're going to talk about next. How do you fix this? We've got to make some tough choices here. Spending needs to come down, but who's going to have to give up what? We've got tough talk on entitlements for you next.
You don't need a major structural change in order to make sure that Social Security is there for the future.
I know anytime we talk about entitlements, people become concerned that something's going to happen that's going to change their life for the worse.
The bottom line is people are going to have to pay more money out of their pocket, and the families I come from, they don't have the money to pay more.
That's why we're saying more for lower income people, less for higher income people.